So, nature versus nurture. Underground music in Asia Pacific, a topic we've wanted to get into for the last few years. Got a great cast of characters here. First of all, introduce who you are and what your company does, and what territory you're in.
Hi, again, my name is Christian. I'm the founder of ISMAYA Group. We produce festivals and concerts and live events and electronic music events in Indonesia.
Jason Swamy, NetEase Cloud Music, China, Wonderfruit in Thailand, Do What You Love Coalition in Hong Kong. We curate talent, we produce festivals, we have a music streaming platform. Those are predominant regions in Asia, and then Robb in Burning Man.
Hi, Matthew Hoag, elrow family. We produce events all over the world, from Ibiza to Barcelona, and excited to be here.
I'm Robb Harker. I'm the CEO of a Supermodified agency, which is based out of Hong Kong, and we run bookings for artists throughout Asia.
Hi, I'm Tom Bray, and I'm co-founder of YETI Out, and we're a creative collective based out of Shanghai and Hong Kong, and we do bookings, parties, and everything in between.
Okay, to get us started, I think it's important to show a bit of historical context. For a lot of people, we're at year 2 or 3 in electronic music's growth in Asia, but actually it goes back a long, long way. And Robb, you were involved in the very early days of electronic music growing in this market, and specifically underground music. So tell us how it was and how it evolved to the point where it is now from an underground perspective.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, the topic was, how do we bring underground music to Asia? And the question really is, how do we bring it back to Asia? Because if you look at sort of the history, in 1991, Lincoln Chen opened Zouk in Singapore. And he ran that as an underground club with underground bookings through until 2005, 2006. In 2000, Womb in Tokyo opened, and again, I mean, that was all completely underground bookings. The full moon parties in Thailand in the early 90s were being played by acts like Lee Burridge. Our agency too, when we started it, our entire roster was underground. It was Nick Warren, Steve Lawler, Lee Burridge, Sasha. And it wasn't until that sort of EDM explosion, what I guess it would have been 2008 or 9 when it kind of kicked off, that things really started to change. But I mean, even as late as 2004, Sasha was here in China doing private jet tours of 8 cities for his Involver album. You know, it was an underground scene.
Christian, how long have you been promoting in the market?
We started having clubs in 2004, so that means what, 13 years, and we've done the festival for 9 years now. So my passion is started from underground music. Along the way, the mainstream, the EDM come out, and we kind of have to find the right balance between both, between the passion and what kind of fuel the engine.
And your big event, the Jakarta Warehouse event, you do have that balance. I mean, you're an example of a large festival, a bit like what Insomniac have been doing in North America, where there is the big EDM stage, and then there's the more left field underground stage. Yeah,
because I think Jakarta Warehouse project now is one of the biggest in Asia. It's 90,000 last year, and growing. And in Indonesia, it feels like it's our responsibility as a platform to educate the market to different kind of music. And since underground music is, techno and house is what we love, we feel the need to, dedicate one stage for the music. And that's why we've been trying to balance out. You have the big lineup, you have the big bookings, but we also want people to know regarding, what other music are there. And we try to bring in the best that we can do, bringing the good lineup. We have Richie Houghton this year, we have Carl Cox last year. We're bringing in elrow this year to help create the experience as well for the music.
Why do you think it's your responsibility? Isn't it your responsibility to not lose money, or is it to nurture the scene? Which way do you look at it?
I think it's mostly for nurturing the scene, because If we feel like we have, if we don't do it, not many other people will do it. And that's kind of part of the responsibility of being, you know, how do you say it? Trying to influence the market to grow in different directions. And again, because it's passion, that's why it feels my responsibility.
And Jason, in terms of festivals in the market generally, there's not that many people doing what Christian's doing in terms of getting that balance right. What's your feeling on that? You're somebody who's been fighting for good music for a long time.
Yeah, I live in the underground, and I'll continue fighting for it. You can't be eating cucumber rolls for the rest of your life. Eventually you get to the uni and the sashimi, the good stuff. But in all seriousness, I think it's important to have that balance, and I think he's struck a great balance on that, because I think it's, for lack of better terms, it's a gateway drug. I don't think people, as your taste develop, you don't live in EDM forever, and I think you have to have promoters that are willing to take a risk and balance out the lineups to expose people to better music, and part of that is using EDM as a conduit to better music, or other music. I don't want to judge.
And in terms of what elrow are doing, obviously it's a brand that's been around for 5 years, but has exploded recently acquired by Superstruct, with a big rollout to go global, and that's where you've come in as well. Elrow's different in a lot of the big brands that are touring, in that the focus is more on slightly left field electronic music. Tell us a bit about the vision of elrow in coming to markets like Asia with that sound.
Well, first of all, we try to balance all the elements like music, production, FX. So everything, it's different in this case, right? We see in Asia a big potential because of the production element that we are bringing to it. So it's first of all a fun experience, right? And we see that this can be a force in this kind of market. That's why we also want to enter into it and be part of it, right? Because we are talking mostly about music all the time, right? But for us, it's an experience. And we believe that with this kind of experience, we can present something different. That's why we also plan to become one of the players in this region.
Okay. And Tom, tell us about what you're doing in this market, particularly here in China.
In Shanghai, we're mostly pushing local underground music and also bringing foreign acts into the city. And yeah, we have a residency in various clubs in Shanghai. We do festivals around Asia. We do bookings and tours, and just trying to link different underground artists together and also present them in Shanghai mostly, because that's where we're based. And we also do events in Hong Kong as well. So yeah, just trying to bridge the gap between different cities and different underground artists.
And how do you define underground in China? What sort of music are we talking about?
I mean, I think underground in China is probably anything that's not in the charts or not top 40. Although it is hard to define what underground music is in China. I think most music in China is quite new music. Like most foreign music is quite new music. So it's not like, I mean, I think it's definitely anything like in the West as well. It's just anything that's not in the charts, really.
So but even mainstream sounding electronic music, if it's not in the charts, that's underground, is that?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's an interesting, again, territory by territory, there's not one rule for the whole continent, that's for sure. One of the ideas of this talk was to sort of come out with a bit of a, had a 10-point plan to sort of come out of here. That's what the whiteboard is for, in case we had any great ideas of how to kind of collectively create some sort of ideas and best practices around the business. We're people who care about this music, and I think you made a great point when Carl Cox plays at his event. It's like a conference behind the stage. Everyone is in the industry. It's the kind of music that a lot of people in the industry are into. How, Jason, tell me how we should, any ideas from you on how to get started on an idea like this?
I think you got to start from the root cause. So philosophically, it has to be a mandate in what you're trying to do. So diversity, support locals, whatever those things are that it's part of your philosophy or DNA, that has to be ingrained in the culture of what you're doing. So when you're doing your programming, you're curating, and you're allocating your budgets, you need to know, okay, I'm going to have the Aviciis of the world that's going to give me my ROI. But I'm also going to support a female DJ, not because she's a girl, because she's good, like you know, Nina Kravitz, for example. But we're also going to support a local DJ that we know has upcoming ability, because you've got to plan. There's short term and then there's long term. There's a short game and there's long game, right? The short game is just trying to capitalize on the Aviciis of the world. The long game is thinking, well, where is this going to go? And you know, underground can mean many different things. Carl Cox is still underground, but isn't it affordable underground? It's very different.
Well, let's come to the money in a bit, but there's two things you said there. One is about new talent. So that's a responsibility of elrow coming into China. Are you going to book locals? Can you agree today that you will book local artists to support the people you bring to the territory?
Yeah, definitely. This is our strong point. We want to have local talents on the bill. We want them to play, you know, because in my opinion, this is the driving force. You know, it looks like in Asia we are going the reverse effect, right? When in Detroit, it was people from Detroit coming out from Detroit, right? In Europe was the same. And here we are going from the outside in, right? So the locals are definitely the most important part of it. Support of the scene.
Yeah, I mean, just Rob, get an opinion from you. We with AFEM, I think Mark's over there, we've had a lot of complaints from promoters in countries around the world who feel greatly offended when Ultra comes in and shoves them aside and their festival goes under 2 years later. This is happening around us. I know it's a slightly different topic, but from your perspective, how are we going to address this issue of brands coming in? If Ultra are going to come in, how can we make sure they book local talent so at least the artists feel supported? We get being a promoter is a very competitive entrepreneurial business, but we've got to support the local talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you like the fact that Ultra is going to come in or not doesn't change the fact that it is going to come in, you know, so you have to work with the reality of what's going to be happening. And I'm not sure what their policies are in other countries, but in Asia, they actually are very supportive of the local talent. And these international festivals, they've realized that one of the best ways to promote your festival in another country overseas or another city within Asia is to do a pre-party. So they'll have some kind of deal where they'll pick a premier club in some city, they'll come in, they'll do a party there, and in exchange, that club's resident gets to come and have a slot at Ultra. So, I mean, it's good and bad. You're seeing these regional DJs getting a shot to play Ultras, but they're not necessarily getting there based on their own merit. They're being leveraged in on pre-party deals and things like that. So, I mean, although they are very supportive, it would be nice to see if there was some other parameters where people could get slots just based on their merit.
Okay, so we've got booking local, think local, book local. Pre-parties is a good way to bring locals in. It makes total sense with locals with their social media reach in the market to help get your story out there when you're coming in as a cold brand to a new market. What about this issue of the underground stage and the mainstream stage? You know, Storm here doesn't have an underground stage. We've been saying to Eric for 3 years, you need to have one, you need to have one. It hasn't yet happened. It's not his fault. We understand there's commercial reasons, but you're doing it where you are. How can we make more promoters do this?
Well, I think another way to incentivize, if the promoter of the main event doesn't see an incentive to do the underground stage, I would reach out to local promoters who are interested in doing it and go, okay, well, if you want to take the financial risk, we're going to have a platform for you to do it. And we'll provide the infrastructure for you to do that. But, you know, it's going to be on your P&L. And we're doing that at Wonderfruit. We're bringing in other promoters, smaller promoters who are pushing even more underground talent than what we're doing. But it really creates a fertile ground of kind of innovation.
Well, in Bali, isn't Ultra Resistance in a separate location? So it's two separate events almost?
Yeah, separate days, separate locations, standalone.
Tell us a bit more about how that works.
So in Bali, the Ultra is 2 days by itself, the main stage. But we separate the Resistance because we realized that sometimes the demographics are different and sometimes the market is totally different. And the fact that we are able to do it as a standalone event actually creates a unique new excitement in the market for underground music.
Okay.
If I could jump in here for a second. It brings up an interesting point, and that is the demographic of who likes underground music. Because in Asia, you had this thriving underground scene, and then it suddenly died out. And one of the reasons it died out is we just all got old, you know? We got married, we started having kids.
No. We haven't got old yet.
But like that demographic kind of retired from clubbing, and the younger demographic coming up wasn't brought into the underground scene. And I mean, I was at Christian's events this past weekend in Ultra. I mean, I looked around, I felt like an old man. And then I went to Resistance, I looked around, I was like, I'm kind of young for this crowd. You know, so it's a very different demographic. And like one of the ways to figure out is how to get this new younger demographic interested in the underground music.
Well, to add to that, I mean, electronic music fundamentally is about discovery. It's about pulling. I mean, you can't get pushed this, you can't get exposed to this on the radio. So it's about discovery. So as promoters and people who create experiences, we need to foster discovery, so like creating collisions. So are you creating an environment where people who just go see Galantis or Kygo would suddenly stumble upon, they're walking across the field to go to another stage and suddenly they hear a sound that they go, what's this? And then that creates that discovery. So as people that just create experiences, we need to understand the mindset and how can we foster that exploration.
Okay, foster discovery is a good one. I like that. So Tom, you're half the age of us, pretty much. Matthew, maybe not, but I think you're probably half the age of the rest of us. Tell us, local kids producing music in China, what are they making when they're 16 years old? Are they just going straight to EDM, or is there are people making underground music in this market?
I mean, that's a pretty broad question. I think there's kids making all kinds of music these days. You know, the internet's a big place, so I think a lot of people are drawing influence from the internet. Obviously, I think in China, with the restriction of the internet, and you know, the average kid in like Wuhan might not even know about SoundCloud, or like, you know, the bedroom producer might go on Swamy or like Leeds or like other platforms before they go on SoundCloud, which is like, you know, a whole different world and opens up your doors to, you know, all different subgenres and influences. So I think a kid in China would have different restrictions from a kid in Hong Kong or a kid in Bali or Singapore, for example. Saying that, I mean, there's a lot of really talented producers these days coming up, a lot of really good bedroom producers. You know, people don't need to necessarily be in a studio right now and be co-signed for a record label to like make good music. To answer your question, I think they're making all kinds of crazy things out there right now. Yeah.
Are there, how are music, and maybe Rob, you can help, or any of you who work within the market, music technology schools, how big are those in this region? Because that's a really good place to kind of get to people who are keen, who want to learn, and kind of influence them at a younger level. What is the state of that here? In the UK and in the US, these schools are exploding with Point Blank and SAE. What's it like in this market?
I think Asia in general just varies country to country. Everything's so different. So I think places like Japan and China, that might be more prevalent. Where I live in Bali, it's not really a thing.
Okay. Do we see that as an opportunity, as a place to catch people at an impressionable start of their career?
I think one of the words that we've gone back to a couple of times is experience, you know, and if these kids that are used to listening to more commercial music suddenly stumble across an underground stage and it's just really minimal music, then they're going to have a more difficult time to connect with it. But if it's something like elrow, which is the full-on experience of the inflatables and the whole party atmosphere, then I think that's something that they can latch on to more likely.
Just to get into the elrow kind of experience a little bit. With, you know, I've been to the Barcelona one many times, to the original, but now that it is expanding and doing events all over the world, what kind of audience are you getting? Are you getting people coming for the inflatables and the you know, the flying DJs in their boats, or is it a real lover of the music, or is it very split?
It's very split, actually. I mean, our target, most of our clients are from 18 to 25, which is quite a young audience if you think about it, right? It's a mixture in between everything. We have older crowd generation that is coming because they love inflatables, you know, and they miss this in their day-to-day life because they are so busy doing stuff and they cannot play anymore. So it's a big mix.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I can say something, I think that it's really important how we communicate towards the young generation, right? We are promoters, and we have to change the mindset in communicating with them. They don't communicate like we did back in the days when Lee Barwich was big here, or Sasha or Digwit. So we have to adopt our mentality to their way of communicating. And this is a major thing we have to change.
How do you relate that specifically to this issue?
Well, look, Asia was always very technological, right? The technology, it's one of the biggest driving force here. So we have to communicate with them over applications, over WeChat, over all these kind of things that the kids are using nowadays. So the usual posters, flyers, and those kind of things aren't working anymore, right? So Facebook, Instagram, all those channels are what will make us be successful in communicating with them.
Okay, one thing that just commenting on the age issue, you know, I think it's a bit of a myth that underground music is for the older people. I mean, I think industry-wise that's very, very true. But I see techno people, and I'm sure at Jakarta Warehouse, what's the audience like listening to that music in that stage? What age group are they?
It is a bit more mature than the main stage, I have to say. But then it's not that as extreme as as I think it's portrayed to be.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you focus, I mean, I think you're talking about underground techno music, but if you look at underground hip hop right now, which is blowing up around Asia, there's amazing underground hip hop all over Asia, which is becoming the voice of the millennials. And we've been booking a lot of them for Wonderfruit. There's lines down the block for that stuff, and they're like sub 25. Like Rich Chigga in Hong Kong, there was a line down the block, and after he left the party at 10:30, the line was still there. You know, so it's genre dependent. I mean, if you're looking into the future bass stuff, future boogie stuff, I mean, that's underground music. I mean, a little bit more easy listening, but that's quite young.
We're talking a lot here about festivals, but actually in the UK, where I've spent most of my life, and in Italy, festivals have killed club culture, pretty much. They've pretty much wiped it out. There's still examples of strong clubs that exist, but you know, even the really historically strong ones like Fabric are not having their best days. Maybe there's other reasons for that, but you know, historically, I know in Hong Kong, you know, the opportunities for a lot of the underground sounds, whatever style it is, are small. They're often in hotels, they're small venues. Are we in danger of Asia kind of exploding with festivals and not nurturing the club scene? Because that's where underground music tends to come from, whether it's drum and bass or techno, it tends to grow through the clubs and go through that system.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So that's quite a dangerous epidemic that we're going to be facing. But in Hong Kong, what I've been pleasantly seeing is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit from younger generations, locals and expats, you know, gathering their friends together and setting up, being promoters and setting up their own little crews and being entrepreneurial and setting up their own little events. They're not necessarily in clubs, like on little islands that are nearby and in parts of Vietnam or Hanoi or Saigon. And so that's good to see that there is this younger generation that are trying to you know, roll up the sleeves and get something done, and they don't have budgets to do, you know, all these fireworks and whatnot.
I mean, I don't think we're saying you have to own a nightclub, right? And we all know that's a very risky business to be in. But, you know, there seems to be a nice rise of smaller events going on around here. You know, actually around the world. You know, I was at Oasis Festival in Marrakesh last week. It's only 3,000 people, but it's a beautiful experience. It's mostly very underground music, and you know, it doesn't need to be 10, 15, 20,000 people. The Bali events are what, 2,500 maximum. Rob, can you give us some examples of some festivals in Asia that are doing this the right way? Wonderfruit obviously is one example, but...
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's either there's the club or the festivals, and at the moment there's no middle ground. So, I mean, Ultra is trying to push side stages, but in terms of festivals that are just predominantly focused on underground music, I mean, beyond Wonderfruit, I can't think of that many that are around. You know, there's Beamfest in Bangkok, and there's Color in the Park, and these are sort of 1,000 to 1,500 capacity events. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of festivals that are focused predominantly on it.
And as somebody who books talent into gigs or clubs or festivals, what percentage of club shows versus festivals do you tend to book, broadly speaking?
I mean, in Southeast Asia, you can count the clubs that book underground music on one hand. You know, there's one in each city, and they're running with 200 or 300 capacity. You know, so they've got a very set ceiling on their prices, and it's really limited in terms of who you can bring, because people want to see some of the bigger underground artists, but it's just the money's not there. It doesn't justify them coming out. For festivals, there's generally a bit more of a market there for it.
Tom?
I just want to shout out Concrete and Grass Festival in Shanghai. It's a music festival that happened last week, and I think that was one of the perfect music festivals. That was like it wasn't commercial, it wasn't underground, but it was just the right everything. Like they got the bookings on point. It was comfortable. It was a community vibe, and they had a stellar lineup. There was both local and international and regional as well, focusing on Asian talent. So I think that's maybe a good example. So yeah, I just want to add that.
How big was that, sorry?
The capacity was probably 4,000 maybe,
okay.
But it was happening over 2 days on a massive like rugby pitch out in Pudong. And yeah, very, very solid, like well curated by Splitworks. So yeah.
Yeah, Howie Lee played that one. That's
Okay.
done but produced by Archie Hamilton.
Okay, Christian?
I just want to add what Rob commented regarding the clubs, because the pricing and everything, and the festival can afford more. And I think that's a key point in this nurturing, because it has to be done both sides. Not only the promoters are doing it, I think the artists and the talent and the management needs to nurture it also, because we work together, you know what I mean? For example, sometimes, for us to bring, we have a bigger budget for the festival, but of course as a club we have lower budget. But if they don't come and understand and try to nurture together, they're not going to connect to the mass, they're not going to connect to the fans, and the industry will not grow. So it has to be an understanding from both sides, the talent and the promoter and the agents, that together we hope that we can nurture the industry together and make it bigger.
So what's the action in that? I think we've got 5 out of our 10. We've got half an hour to go. We're doing pretty good. How do we turn this kind of festival club issue into a positive call to action?
I think with the ticket prices is a really key thing as well. Like going back to Concrete and Grass, they made it very affordable for people to go. So a ticket was like 250 RMB, I think it was like 320 RMB, like 250 early bird, 320 at the door. And to see the amount of artists that you get to see in over 2 days, I think sometimes promoters are charging that for a single night just to see a single international DJ. So that's making it more accessible for students, for the general public. So I think keeping it accessible is like a huge thing.
Yeah, well, that's down to the artists, the agents, the managers, the promoters.
Exactly, it's trickle down.
Yeah, I know, I bet it is.
Well,
I mean, from a consumer perspective, I think like a price point is like a very important thing. But obviously, I know there's so much that comes into that as well. So.
But I mean, it is difficult. Sometimes we approach an artist and say, "Look, do you want to come out to Asia and do a tour?" And they're excited about the idea, and then they realize that they have to play 5 or 6 shows in Asia and travel all around just to make the same amount of money as one gig in Europe or America, and then they're suddenly not so excited about coming out to Asia. And I think they need to sort of help invest in nurturing the scene so that that club culture can build from a viable point, and then it'll spill out into bigger events.
There was an anecdote about how John Digweed used to use Asia as a market. Was that you? Do you want to explain that?
Well, I think if you're investing in, if an artist is trying to develop himself and the manager and agent are working together to try to grow an artist globally, invariably you're going to go through, upturns and downturns. And sometimes you need to just invest and not get the fee that you normally get, and just to grow a market. And you might be taking compromise on your price, but in the long term, when you've fallen out of favor in a particular market, you have another market to rely on. So it's hedging and diversifying. But to Tom's point in terms of making things affordable, at the end of the day, as a promoter, you're spending a lot of money, and generally, you have so many external factors that can cause you to lose a lot of money. But how do you still achieve accessibility? Now, if you take a segmentation tactical approach, let's say you take demographics, you price things demographically. So let's say if you're under 18 pricing, let's say 18 to 25 pricing, or if you know someone simply can't afford it, then the pricing layaway plans. So there are ways to go around creating flexibility and payment where you can achieve your financial goals, and you're also laying the groundwork for younger people to be able to be your lifetime customer.
So kind of discovery pricing, which is what they've been doing at record retail for many years. So discovery prices, yeah. Okay, we've got 4 more to come up with. If anybody's got any ideas out there as well, put your hand up and we'll get your input. So just as a recap, so think and book local. 2, use locals for socials, kind of 2 in 1 there. Guest promoters to promote underground stages, just a call to action for people to do that. Foster discovery, change how we communicate to people. And number 6, make events affordable, price point, discovery pricing.
One more, don't shove underground in someone's face to someone who doesn't know underground, right? I think you've got to put some lipstick on the pig and put the vocals on, make it a more accessible version of the underground, right? You're not going to shove them Adam Bayer right off the bat because you're going to scare them away. But something that's much more digestible in terms of underground and ease them in. Some vocals, some breaks, some drops.
That's why someone like Clapton does so well in Asia. Exactly. I think he's kind of rides that sort of border between.
They want more of that after a while. So.
Okay. Does anybody have any contribution out there? Like to help us finish this list? Can you, when you stand up, tell us your name, who you work for, or if you're an artist, and what country you're from?
Oh man, that's a lot. My name's Lucian. I work for a company called Foundia in Hangzhou. My question's about corporate sponsors like Budweiser for the upcoming Storm Festival. I'm just wondering if big name sponsors like this are less likely to contribute for events that are more underground.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question, and I think I want you guys to answer it, but I think just to say there's a really good example out there of Boiler Room who are actually making more money out of brands than almost any other platform in global dance music, and that's all about underground culture. So it can be done, but it's a good question about events. As promoters with brands, how do you answer that?
I think generally when we talk to brands, right away they go after the big names, the main stage, the mainstream, right? But again, that's part of the education that we need to give. A lot of brands, we have to direct them that, okay, this is an investment, this is making your brand unique, making your brand different. Again, it's communication, education. Sometimes we have to, okay, I'll let you do this, but please support this. So sometimes it's an understanding between the brand and us that to know that you have your mission, but we have our mission. If we support each other, we can help grow.
Jason, your experience with Wonderfruit, how are you doing with brands for that event? That's a sort of first adopter audience. Everyone who goes there is pretty cool, into cool music. They're always the first into new stuff. Does that attract certain brands, or has that been difficult?
It's definitely more difficult because we don't allow brand presence on site because that affects the experience. So in that case, it requires a lot of soul searching into finding brands that share our same ethos. So sustainability, eco-friendliness, altruism, community building, and then so you need to look at brands and go, okay, we understand that, we want to support that. And at the end of the day, we build crazy art installations on site and someone needs to fund it. So we find a middle ground on how we can work with brands that are contextually aligned with what we're doing, or physically the experience it matches what we're doing. In the previous panel I was saying, a Samsung charging station, that makes sense. Or like Air Asia sponsoring our flights to support bringing regional and local talent. That has a narrative to it.
Matthew, how with elrow? I would imagine there's a lot of brands coming to the elrow brand at the moment.
As Jason said, it's you have to find the balance, right, in between. A lot of brands ask for activation on sites, and we also try to make it happen, but still not to affect the show too much, right, in order to being able to lower the risk also to our partners, and then, but still make the sponsor happy, right? So it's always mixed in between the two things.
But again, I think it's about, in answer to your question, I think it's also about how you position yourself as a promoter. That boiler room discovery audience is hugely valuable to a lot of brands. So I think it's about finding the right one. I'm just trying to, we need to work out an action because I think it's worthy. It may be a challenge more than an action. I don't know. Any thoughts your side? Okay. Next question. There was somebody over there. Okay.
Hi, my name's John. I'm from Loop Central. We are a media news website in Vietnam. And so I think a problem in Vietnam is that people don't know the value of music or the artists that the promoters are bringing. So you think that's also another point to educate the mass audience of, you know, paying $30, $50, $100 to see some artists, because it's like it's rare to bring somebody that size to a smaller country like Vietnam. So that's I think it's also a point with a problem in Vietnam right now.
Any comments on that?
I think that kind of comes down to fostering discovery. You know, it's all about educating the customer base at these events so that they can understand why seeing one DJ is so much more special and potentially is going to cost more than seeing another one. You know, and in China, on the commercial side of things, it's all just based around the DJ Mag Top 100. That's how they put a value on the artist. But for underground music, I think it's more just like a grassroots education by the promoters of the people to make that happen.
It's interesting. We haven't talked about media at all, and you know, the DJ Mag Top 100 gets talked about all the time. But does the RA poll mean anything in Asia?
It means something to the same people that Christian described as coming to see Carl Cox, the DJs and the promoters. You know, it's still within that sort of niche market of people, and it's the same if somebody's got a #1 hit on a Beatport. You know, it doesn't really translate as much in terms of trying to promote that artist out here.
But in terms of media in this region, I mean, how are young kids in China finding out about music through media, or is it just all through socials? I'm talking traditional media, you know, like media brands like a Mixmag or an RA, or.
I mean, like, I think RA and like Mixmag, that's kind of for kids that lived abroad and can associate to that brand. Like if they went to uni in the UK, then they'll probably know what Mixmag is. If you're musically conscious online, then you'll definitely follow like Resident Advisor, Fact Magazine, kind of like Pitchfork, you know, the more taste-making brands. But I think that the local Chinese kid wouldn't really be familiar with what Resident Advisor or Pitchfork is. So there's actually a huge lack of music publications and media in China. There's like, in terms of underground music, for like grassroots music, I think, if you're any sort of media publication, you're going to have a WeChat account. So your WeChat's going to be pretty much the only way to directly communicate with your audience. And I follow like 2 music magazines. I follow like Woozy and like another local Shanghainese like music magazine. There's like really not much, and correct me if I'm wrong, and yeah, like there's really not much in China, and I can only speak for China. But I think once you're outside China, there's definitely a ton of blogs that you can follow and yeah, etc.
What I've noticed in China is, and I'm relatively new to the market, industry specific, is instead of traditional media is influencers on WeChat. So there's influencers that have a particular following, and they provide information that allows the young people to kind of gravitate and learn about it. And you know, if he says it's cool, then it's probably cool, and I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah, I think that's they are kind of the modern, not quite the modern magazines, but if you create a network of influencers that can help do what a magazine used to do 20 years ago, you know. I think one thing that's interesting here is encouraging people into this industry, and that's something IMS really tries to focus on, is it's not about just being a DJ or being a band. It's about being a manager, an agent, a promoter, something we've really tried to do. I started out as a music journalist, and there's so many different ways into this industry. I never wanted to be on the stage. Well, I am now, but I never wanted to be DJing or anything like that. And I think it's really important we all help promote all the different channels into this business. And that kind of links to this, you know, why not launch your own media platform? Why not launch something that has great influence promoting different styles of music? Because the opportunity is there, the audience is there. Oh.
Hello, my name is Ilya, Lawa DJ member based in Hangzhou. So I got a question. If there is any possibility for no-name DJ to perform in your festivals, like do you have any contests like Pyro has, for example, for this mention mixtape, we got a contest and to perform to IYAMF festival. So do you have something like that?
In my festival in our territory, Indonesia, we do. So we actually work with brands to discover new talents. We have what we call like a DJ hunt competition, which is nationwide. And we work with like 50 medias, with sponsorships. And the result is, you know, it's surprise. Sometimes we're surprised to see like, last year we have like 7,000 people applying for the contest, and the winner gets to play at the festival. And from there, we actually discover new artists, and now they can, the media find out who they are, and it can grow the local scene. So we try to do that.
Yeah, we have a program at Wonderfruit called Intermission, which is actually mentored by Howie B, who's a legend, and you can submit your demos, and he will mentor and guide you so that you can play during the intermission between the big acts.
Yeah, well, I've actually put that in as we've got 10. Can you believe it? Promoters to have new talent contests is definitely a way to do it. You know, James Abilia, Youssef, these guys all won DJ competitions in various different publications back in the day. It's definitely a route to market and something brands do a lot, but promoters should be doing the same with their own competitions for their own events.
Yes, hello. I'm Tommy Hendricks from the Mansion in Shanghai. And I think a very important point to grow underground music, especially in China, is actually cooperation with the Chinese government. The role of the Chinese government is so influential in China. If there are ways to work together with the government and universities to get good music classes, the development of young people really can improve a lot. So I think it's probably also the hardest way, but find a way to cooperate with Chinese government, make the Chinese government officially recognize electronic music as a form of art instead of only a commercial platform. I think this could really help to develop the underground scene in China.
Guys, any comments on that?
I think the Mansion guys work with the government really well because they're the only people I know that can throw a party on the Great Wall of China. So shout out Great Wall Festival. Like we were there with the Mansion crew. When was it? May? And we were raving on the Great Wall of China. Just like 400 people just going at it. So yeah, shout out to Mansion and the government ties.
Nice, nice. Anybody else? Okay, any more questions out there? We've got 11 now.
Hi, my name is Danny, and I'm working with Club Sector in Shenzhen. I have a question. If like we have 2 rooms in our club, like one is main room and another is underground room, and we are doing like pretty much good events during the weekends. But we have noticed the problem is like the mainstream are focusing on like we are playing like dubstep, trap, future bass in the main room, and like drum and bass, UK bass in the underground. And instead of the fact that we are doing like 1 ticket, 2 events, like the 2 rooms, the audience, like they don't listen to each other, and it's really hard to make the bridge, really like to connect mainstream and the underground. And in China, like to be honest, in the worst circumstances, like sometimes the mainstream and underground, they kind of like hate each other, because like you got a lot of complaints when you throw a good underground artist in a big club, and like the underground people, when they listen to mainstream music, they think like, oh, it's too commercial and blah, blah, blah. So like, is there really a way to blend them together or like make a bridge, make a connection.
How does that work at Jakarta Warehouse? Is it two different worlds kind of in one event?
I think in a way you can sense it's two different worlds, but what we always hope for at the end is the world discover each other. So maybe on the way to the main stage, they saw the music, they listened to the music and they're attracted. Maybe hopefully this year they saw the elrow production, they got attracted. But that's how you discover music, and that's part of the experience.
One thing that I think Insomniac tried about 4 years ago was when Carl Cox and Richie played on the main stage at EDC Vegas. And actually, I think Luciano opened the main stage at Tomorrowland's this year in Belgium, and a couple of others did. What's your feeling on that? Did that work? Does anybody know, Rob? Would you recommend one of your artists to do that?
I think if they're doing something else on another stage that's also suitable where they can really showcase themselves, then doing something like that in an earlier slot, I don't see any harm in it. You know, and I mean, a lot of times if you have a festival in Asia, they'll just start banging out music from like the minute doors open, and that's not really what you need. You know, it's actually nice to have a little more relaxed music on the main stage while it starts to fill up before some of the other artists come on.
Okay, good question. Any more out there? Tom, just going back to something we were talking about with influencers that Jason brought up. With your, how old are you, by the way?
Me, I'm 29.
29, okay. Are you too old for the influencer world, or are you, is that part of your...
Never too old, never too old.
Is that a big thing here in China, though? Is the influencer, I mean, obviously in Europe it's huge with Instagram, but I'd imagine here it might be different.
Yeah, I think it's probably even worse here, or better. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing. I mean, KOL is such a buzzword here. Like, I don't know. Like, I think everyone's got an opinion, so technically everyone can be influencing someone. So I'm not sure. Like, it's crazy how some people have just really created a career out of it, and like the Zubo, like the live stream culture in China is crazy. Like, you go to like festivals or like trade shows. Like we went to the streetwear trade show called Hoag and Concrete and Grass, and I'm sure some people here have also seen like people just on phones, like holding a stick with like 4 phones and like a walkie-talkie thing, and just like going around chatting and just like showing the world like what they're doing. And I don't know, like, are you making a difference? Like, are you really changing? I don't know, like, it's a really confusing thing for me to like kind of digest the whole influencing thing in China. So I myself, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. Rob, you mentioned earlier that maybe you were sat on the wrong panel, but you've brought some great insight from your position. Will you change Supermodified as you move forwards and book more underground artists? I know you're still working with some from back in the day, but are you actively looking for underground artists or not?
I mean, I think it's safe to say we have been sort of just getting a little bit comfortable doing what we're doing, but I mean...
Making lots of money.
No comment. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's something, it's like Christian said earlier, it's a passion. And if something like that is a passion, you can't just turn your back on it, you know? So it is something that even if I'm not personally doing, I have agents that are working within the agency that are pushing the boundaries for that.
There's quite a lot of examples at the moment of female talents breaking big from the underground. Obviously the obvious, Nina Kravitz, but there's this Belgian model, Amelie Lenz, who's really exploding. Social media is through the roof. Everyone's talking about her. Just a little bit about that. Obviously image is, we can't deny it's a factor in that, but tell us a little bit about supporting the female artists through this kind of experience, because the underground is awash with female talent. There's so much of it, and in Asia there's a lot of it as well. How are some of these going to rise to the top? Jason, any views on that?
I still think it's got to be quality based, right? The cover of Mix Mag DJ of the Year was Black Madonna, and you know, no offense, she's not particularly what you would think is traditional beauty, but she's a fucking rock star, and she kills it, and she's won it by merit, and it's taken her quite a while. So, you know, I wear two hats coming from the Burning Man culture and for the future, and in that kind of world, it's extremely important for me to have gender-balanced DJ programming. Otherwise, the community kind of hang us to dry, so even cultural diversity. But, you know, we should be judging a book based on quality, not by its image.
But it is interesting that some of these women are exploding, playing very uncompromising music, and you know it's not a negative; it's a positive. Women are breaking through from techno, whereas 5 years ago there were literally 5 to 7 names you could mention.
It shouldn't be a deciding factor whether it's male or female. It should be quality. So should there be an Indian DJ? Should there be an African DJ? You know, black coffee's blowing up now. African sound is blowing up. But I mean, the curation decision should be: can we monetize the DJ? Is it on brand? Is it impacting the audience? And is it going to provide a great experience?
How do you feel about initiatives by some brands to insist on promoters booking 50% male and female? That's become quite a big story in Europe. Has that reached Asia at all? It's something that Smirnoff have been pushing very heavily.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that's reached out to Asia. And I mean, especially if they want to work within the regional talent pool, there just wouldn't be enough people to keep that balance. But I mean, I tend to agree with Jason. You shouldn't have to have a certain number of people in your lineup just based on quotas. You know, people should be in the lineup because of how well they play. Okay. Any more questions?
If not, we'll just have a quick summary of our 11 points. If any of you disagree that they shouldn't stay up there, we can debate that. So number 1, think and book local. I think we're all down with that. Number 2, use locals for socials. Guest promoters to promote more underground stages, and for us to put some pressure on some of those promoters to do so. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. Number 4, foster discovery. 5, change how we communicate to young people. 6, make events affordable, discovery pricing, and that's the whole ecosystem from artists, managers, promoters, and agents to make that actually work. Number 7, don't shove it down people's throats. Very eloquently put, but it says what it needs to say. Number 8, focus on influencers as kind of a way to tap into new audiences and the right audiences. Number 9, encourage entrepreneurialism, which is what I was saying about not just encouraging people to be a DJ. There's so many other ways to help push the music that you're passionate and that you love. Promoters to have new talent contests, great idea from the floor there. And the 11th one was going back to music education and the importance of working with governments in your territory to try to make easy access points into music education at a young age, which I think is a good way to encourage people in very early and their tastes change over time. So I think that's a pretty good list. Does everybody agree? Just number 3, and we'll end on this point, which is about promoters having underground stages at festivals. Some festivals have 25 stages, some have 5, some have 2, some have 1. In the agent world, agents from the big agencies, whether they're small independents or the Paradigms or the WMEs or the CAAs, have extremely powerful leverage over people like you guys. Have you ever been kind of forced into kind of pushing a different style or having a stage to promote and nurture a style of music through, whether it's drum and bass or anything?
Well, luckily, so far, haven't been, so we've been lucky, I guess. No, but I guess because we also trying to be diverse ourselves, so we don't have the challenges right now.
Jason?
I've fortunate been, they're not pushing me, I usually push them to show me what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Rob?
No, we don't really push people in that direction. You know, I mean, generally the promoter has an idea in their mind of what they want with the event, and then I kind of feel my job as an agent is to deliver something that's suitable to what they want.
Well, just to a final point was Burning Man. Tell us just a little bit about that, because actually, like I was saying about Boiler Room, where there's this giant global audience of people listening to non-commercial electronic music. Elrow, a great example of a brand exploding around the world with non-commercial electronic music. Burning Man is pretty much driven by non-commercial electronic music. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, with Burning Man, we have a stage called Robot Heart. It's an old English bus, double-decker bus that we created a 100,000-watt sound system with about a few thousand LEDs on it, and naked people dance in the heart. And we have the programming running for about 14 hours a night for 8 days straight. And we don't release a lineup because we don't want people to be clouded by judgment of, hey, I'm going to go see that DJ. We want you to come to experience the experience for what it is, for the sunrise, for the sunset. And that changes your paradigm of thinking of how you experience something. Because if you go to see something specifically, you've already anchored yourself to particular beliefs of what it is that you want to see. And that is, to me, is not the ethos and fundamental reason why you love electronic music. That discovery of that DJ, that first time you saw it, is why you loved it. So why ruin that feeling by anchoring yourself to something that you already know? So I think, you know, that's a different paradigm out there, but I definitely implore you guys to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, they're both examples of where the experience almost overrides the actual individual tracks or the performances, and that's something that I think underground culture does incredibly well. It is about that vibe and that feeling and that commonality between people. So just to end, just give us a bit of a positive or negative read on where you think underground music's heading in Asia Pacific from where you sit. Are you positive things are going in the right direction, or are you pessimistic about its growth?
I think we're very positive. I mean, like, I think in Asia, I hate to say this, but we are still a bit behind. Maybe not so much anymore, but you can see the trend changing, you know, in Europe, in the US, and I believe that in Asia will follow through, and then the underground becomes, you know, it shouldn't be called underground anymore. It's just different kind of genre of music. So we have positive vibes for it.
Jason?
In the short term, not positive, but in the mid-long term, very bullish.
What's the mid-long term? How many years are we talking?
In more the developed regions, like Bali's of the world, I think we're almost there. 3 years, 2-3 years. In more than, I mean, if you look at Vietnam this year episode, I mean, that line, they basically took over BPM's lineup, and that's going to change the dynamic of the region significantly. He's obviously doing amazing things in that world, and elrow is going to change the landscape. I mean, you know, there's exponential movement in that because there's so many people trying to do this, especially with these kind of conferences. And if everyone's working on those kind of points, it's, you know, I think we're looking at a 3 to 7 year window.
Okay, Matthew?
Fully agree, positive. In short, we will see a big change over here.
I think it's definitely headed in a positive direction. I think 3 or 4 years from now, we're not going to be sitting here and then heading out tomorrow to Storm to go and watch Massioplex on the main stage headlining. So, I mean, I don't think I'm that optimistic, but I do think it's definitely headed in a positive direction.
There might be some inflatables there, though.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's definitely positive. Every year there's new underground crews coming together, new producers making good music. So yeah, I think every year it's getting more and more exciting, so definitely positive.
Great, well, thank you very much. Interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you.